Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. And as I said, a happy post-Thanksgiving for everyone. But we're not going to talk about Shabbat, we're not going to talk about Thanksgiving. We have to talk about something fascinating within this parasha, Mandrake root. Dudaim. Okay, so what is Mandrake? It's a kind of plant, flower. It can be poisonous, but in the right proportions, ancient people often thought it had medicinal practices. And one of the particular medicinal practices that it was supposed to have was for fertility. See, Mandrake comes in a root that is often shaped like a person. And people sort of thought, well, it's kind of like a person. Maybe it can help me make a person. And this should be a little bit of an insight into the middle section of this week's Torah portion, where we talk about Leah and Rachel squabbling over Mandrake root. I know, it doesn't exactly sound very spiritual. Two sisters squabbling over who gets the Mandrake that Leah's son Reuben found. Rachel is, of course, desperate for the Mandrake because, well, at this point she still has no children. Although she is the beloved of Yaakov, the beloved of Jacob, the one that he worked 7 years to get married and only ended up with Leah because her father Lavan tricked them. Well, he still has no kids by Rachel. And that's a big deal in the ancient world. For some people, even to this day, it is still a very, very important point. And so Rachel is getting very worried. Now, Leah, on the other hand, she has worries of her own. Because although she has been very productive in giving him sons, she is still not the loved wife. And at this particular point in the story, Leah has not had the company of her husband, to be euphemistic, for quite some time. Which, by the way, is in contravention of later law as established by the Torah. The husband is not allowed to pick and choose which wife, if he has more than one, he wishes to be familiar with to the exclusion of the other. That is not proper family behavior. Now, why is this important? Well, because you see, Leah was already in a hard place to begin with. Leah's introduced to us rather unusually for the biblical introduction of women as having not a fair form, not as being beautiful, not as finding favor in the eyes of all that looked upon her, but as having weak eyes or soft eyes. It's a bit of an unusual term to try and translate. We're not quite sure what it's meant to mean, but don't worry, the Midrash steps forward and says, I know what it means that she has soft eyes. It means that she has cried herself almost blind. Okay. Why, then the Midrash asks rhetorically, would she have been crying so much as to cause herself to become blind? Well, because people said when she and Rachel were getting older that it was a perfect match. Look, here is Rivka off in the land of Canaan with 2 sons, and here is her brother Lavan back in the land of Haran with 2 daughters. Set aside your modern discomfort with cousins marrying cousins. This was perfectly normal and in some cases even preferred. Yes, we don't do this now, but they did back then. 2 boys, 2 girls, a perfect match. Right? Matchmaker, matchmaker. It's already been made. We've got 2 boys, 2 girls, and of course, we're not going to be picky about this. The eldest should marry the eldest, and the youngest should marry the youngest. Very simple. At which point Leah said, well, tell me about the eldest of my aunt Rivka. And who was the eldest in Rivka's household?
Esau.
Esau. And what do we know about Esau?
Aggressive, hunter.
Aggressive, a hunter, a man of the field, and probably not in the farmy kind of way, since after all, Isaac asked him to go out and hunt for him. So probably more of the bow and arrow kind of guy, although we hope maybe using snares, as that would allow him to make them kosher at the very least. But we also know that he was impetuous. We know that he was the kind of person to make rash decisions, such as selling his birthright, his extra share of inheritance, for a bowl of soup. Not exactly a good catch. And yet he is still one of the sons of Isaac and Rivka. He is still from a family of wealth and prestige. He is still the grandson of Abraham, after all. He is still set to reap the benefit, the blessings of the covenant of Abraham. You know, and as we know later on, he develops his own country. He has his own 12 tribes. He rises in stature. Yet Rivka cried herself almost blind, thinking that this might be the man that she would marry. Is he not a catch? Strong, muscular, clearly able to defend her against all comers, since he, we later find out, has a roving band of mercenaries that work for him.
You say Rivka, not Leah.
Sorry, surely this was a good catch for Leah, right?
Yeah.
Why not? I saw a hand over
I
here.
was going to say the same thing he was going to say.
There is an old truism that if you want people to respond, make a mistake. Right? If you want people to read your email, put a typo in it, then you'll get a 38 responses saying, you know you made a typo? It's exactly. We all know the trick, and yet we all still fall for it. So, do we see any red flags here? If you were, if your daughter, your sister, your friend was contemplating dating Esau, what advice would you give to her?
Stay away from him.
Run! Run! Yes, I know he comes from a wealthy family. Yes, I know he seems strong and mighty and macho and all masculine kind of things. But he's throwing up more red flags than you're going to find in a bull ring. He is clearly somebody that is aggressive and impulsive, and that is a very dangerous conversation, especially if you are his spouse, and especially if you hear, furthermore, that the first wife that he had married, he later discovered was not popular among his parents, and so he basically married another one to shut up his parents. Would you like to be a wife who could be cast aside so easily when he changes his mind for whatever whim might strike him? Probably not a good idea. And indeed, this may be one of the reasons why Leah went along with the ruse that ended up with her getting married to Jacob, when that was not what Jacob had been originally trying to arrange. Maybe this was her desperate attempt to stay with him. But what about Rachel on the other hand? Well, Rachel too, over this issue of the Mandrake, we see is also desperate. Why would she be so insistent? Please give me the Mandrake. Please allow me to use this medicinally in order to allow myself to become fertile and be able to give a child to my husband. Well, because she looked at her husband and said, you know, I told him that I was having trouble with fertility. The same way that his mother, Rivka, had trouble with fertility. But unlike his father, Isaac, who prayed on behalf of Rivka, Jacob just said, am I God that I can give you kids? Jacob seemed quite content with the children that Leah was producing for him and was not interested in the needs of Rachel. And so she was getting worried. If he was not even willing to pray for her, then how much time would elapse before he would finally realize, you know, she's not as young and beautiful as she once was. When I saw her there standing by the well, she's not given me any children. I have no real ties to her. I'll just divorce her. Why would I keep her around if she's not the mother of my children? Rachel was becoming worried, desperate that her husband would leave her over this issue. And so the Mandrake was a last-ditch effort to secure a child that would secure her place in the family. And it worked. It did. She finally had a child, and they were, of course, still together for much longer, and she always occupied a very special place in Jacob's heart. Truth be told, it is likely that she would have always had that place in his heart, but he wasn't very good at showing her that. He wasn't very good at making her feel the love that he felt, which is a common problem in so many of our relationships. So what does this Mandrake tell us? What is this little episode, which seems almost like a throwaway, a vignette of a different time, a different people, a different concern? It tells us that these relationships are quite fraught with peril. Rachel is worried of losing the husband she has. Leah was worried about having the husband that she didn't want. All of them were unsure of what their future would hold and whether they would be able to find love, understanding, compassion. This little vignette of the Mandrake helps throw that into sharp relief. We idolize our ancestors as we should. Our avot, our ancestors, are indeed people that can show us the ways that we can walk in our life. Not because they were flawless, not because they were perfect, not because they made no mistakes, but by both their righteous actions as well as their stumbling, we are able to learn better how we should comport ourselves in our own relationships, how we can express our love to each other, how we can give assurance and strength to each other in times of doubt, how we can look to support one another. Because there is that one other layer to this whole story that is often glossed over, which is that Rachel and Leah finally came to an understanding. The two rival sisters, the two that had been in competition over their husband, they finally came to an understanding that they would help one another rather than compete against each other. And indeed, from this point forward, we see that their relationship stabilizes and becomes one again of sisterly love, affection, and support. It's not only with our intimate partners that we must be careful with how we treat one another, but also with the other members of our family as well, because we are uniquely situated to do harm to one another in all of our closest relationships, and we must look for opportunities to help rather than to harm. It's a small thing, a small root, symbolizing the core of who we are. Let's make sure that we look at it wisely, share it appropriately. Shabbat Shalom.